the fact that enterprises and institutions are waking up to like, hey, wait a minute, like we don't have to set up our entire own infrastructure and run it and do all these setups and integrations, but we can actually just plug into this globally atomic state machine that everybody else is already using and has done the hard work of like maintaining, securing, building integrations on top of. Then you start getting like this, maybe you start getting somewhat closer to crypto's vision of, P2P payments and much better global commerce, much more efficient. Hopefully we see more of that going forward.
This episode is brought to you by Helium Mobile. They've created a crypto-native phone plan for unlimited talk, text, and data for just $20 a month. We'll chat more about them later in the show. Before we get moving on today's episode, just a quick disclaimer. The views expressed on this podcast by either myself, my co-host, or any guests are their personal views and do not represent the views of any associated organization. Nothing in the episode should be construed or relied upon as financial, technical, tax, legal, or any other advice. Okay, let's jump into the episode. All right, everyone, welcome back to another episode of Lightspeed. We missed you last week, so this is our first roundup in 2 weeks. So we got plenty to talk about. There's no doubt about it. But Mert, I know you were just at Consensus last week, and people used to love to try to call cycle tops based on like the craziness of the conference or what people are talking about, or is it all price talk or all shop talk? I don't think that really exists anymore, or it is really like a working function now, just because conferences have gotten crazy, full stop. There's a lot of them put on by a lot of different teams, and people love to go all out. So I don't really think it works anymore, but nonetheless, I want to get a vibe check from you. What was it like from the boots on the ground perspective being in Austin last week?
Sure, yeah. My perspective is going to be biased because I went to Solana events and VC happy hours and stuff like that. I didn't actually go to the conference itself, except for like a side event. But overall, I think like one of the themes was a lot of institutional folks and like these sovereign wealth funds and like, S&P even, and some of the TradFi companies looking more into crypto was kind of what I noticed. Even a lot of like political stuff as well. Like I think there was like a dinner with senators and political fundraisers and whatnot. So, compared to some of the other ones I've been to where people are kind of just flashing Lambos and, their watch collections, this one seemed to be refreshingly, which is a weird thing to say, but refreshingly focused on, policy, regulation, products, adoption for some of the older institutions, and just, chatting, seeing what the pain points are, and overall things like that. And one of the other things I noticed was, so I went to Austin last year for Permissionless 2 from Blockworks. And that was kind of like just me and Anatoly and like Lucas and like maybe 7, 8, 9 other Solana people. And we kind of felt we were in like foreign land. And this time there was a Solana house, and it was so overcrowded that they made another Solana house. And there was a lot of Solana events. In fact, I couldn't go to all of them. And so I really liked seeing, and then like even at the Solana events, there was a lot of people from other ecosystems, like the Move guys and some Ethereum folks, Cosmos folks. And so it seemed to be much more collaborative and a wide range of, let's say, chains and ecosystems. And so I would say, like, overall, I was super happy with the progress we made. If you can judge crypto by conferences, I would say this conference was better than most of the other ones I've been to. And so yeah, I give it a thumbs up.
Nice. That's good to hear. It's funny. Yeah. Permissionless last year was what, September of last year. I just pulled up CoinGecko and price was at $17 for Sol. So nothing drives sentiment like price. Am I right? But that's good to hear, man. Did you, I'm curious, did you see, well, there's always like the builders that go to these conferences to try to like push their upcoming and emerging ideas. Was there any like new verticals that you see coming, like builders coming to Solana to build like X on Solana? Anything like that you were like, oh, this is a really cool iteration or something I'm excited to see?
The creator focused things, which maybe ties a little bit into the celebrity coin, trend a little bit. I saw quite a few of that. Like people are trying to look at new ways of observing the dynamics between creators and their fans and whatnot. I also even saw some Solana focused infrastructure stuff. Some of the stuff might be confidential, so I'm probably not going to go into too much detail, but basically like more um, uh, uh, more infrastructure on Solana in the context of like maybe off-chain compute, ZK, exporting Solana's stack to other ecosystems, maybe interoperability with other ecosystems. That generally, used to not be such a thing, but now it is. I also saw a lot of, and this is obviously biased somewhat due to the events that I was at, but a lot of look into the internals of Solana, like better block packing, re-looking at MEV, transaction landing, things that would be interesting for some of the quant firms, the market makers, etc. I saw a relatively big uptick in that, and also gaming, Web3 gaming. Oh, I hate saying the word Web3, but damn.
I hate
But
it too. I really hate it.
So yeah, it seemed like some sort of validator stuff, gaming creator stuff. I saw some proof of work based stuff, like similar to Oregon. So that was interesting. And Teleport was there. Teleport is like the we actually had them on the show, right? The, let's say, decentralized Uber. They had rides with Teleport where you could call it. So that was interesting.
How did it work? Because every time I'm in a city, I'm like, I go to New York every now and then. It's still not in New York, but it makes sense. I'd go to the conference cities. But I saw a couple of screenshots of like $6 rides when Ubers were $20. Of course, this is exactly like what Uber did and Lyft did, and like battled each other to get the fees low. COVID hit, changed everything. But I'm curious, how was the Teleport UX?
So I actually didn't use it because I have an Android and it's for iOS only.
Oh, brutal.
But I did go on the ride where other people called it, and it seemed like a normal Uber experience. That's obviously a gargantuan task in startup to build. But I thought it was cool that they actually had customers and it was being used, which is pretty refreshing from the usual state of affairs in crypto, which is you say it exists, raise money for it, and then don't ship it. But so this exists, so I was pretty happy to see that.
Nice. All right, that's cool. I don't want to shill our own podcast here, but I did an episode with Svi from Baxis, and that was the most interesting conversation I have had in crypto in so long. I was getting like really burnt out and tired, honestly, of this just like infrastructure circle jerk. And he came in and was like, "Oh yeah, I like backed into crypto. I wanted to build a really cool marketplace centered around trading wines and spirits, mostly whiskey. And like, oh yeah, I realized like building on a blockchain would actually give me some really cool benefits that would be very hard to get outside of that." And I was like, holy shit, because in this industry, we are covered with just a bunch of nerds, including myself, who was like, I love what's going on here. Let me try to like build a product on it. Which then you're like backing into the useful piece, right? You started with the idea of where you're going to build it, and then you're trying to figure out what to build. Versus Svi had the total opposite route where he was like, yeah, I'm building a marketplace. I'm starting to get some traction, and I just want to make it better. And like, oh, okay, now I'm picking up my technical back end based on how to make it the best. I was like, holy shit, like we do not see enough of that, which is really, really interesting. But that whole conversation, like, I don't know, like even going back and telling the analyst team, I was like, guys, I just had the best podcast ever. And everyone's like, all right, like, what was it? I'm like, okay, don't laugh at me. It's putting whiskey on the blockchain. So like it was funny to, it's like, it is kind of like an interesting thing. And at first pass, it does sound silly. But I don't know, the idea of putting marketplaces like that on chain actually does get you this massive liquidity and composability benefit that I think is really challenging to get outside of blockchain. And I think the whiskey market is actually one of the more interesting places for this because, it has always been in the back shadows, and a lot of it happens in like rural areas. And it is actually like it's like digitizing a very old and long-standing industry. So I don't know. That has got me really fired up to go hunt for businesses that are building on chain because it improves the product of that they already have or are already caring about building. And the last piece I thought that was super interesting about this was I would encourage everyone to just like go like log in, make an account. It's like a typical Gmail sign in or whatever, because you don't have to buy anything, obviously, but going on there, you have no idea that it is built. There uses a blockchain backend, and that has been one of those ideas that people kept spewing for a while. Was oh yeah, like eventually you're going to log into these apps and have no idea that you're on chain, but now it's actually happening. So I don't know. It was like a really cool like wake up moment for me. So I don't know if you saw anything like that, but that is very much what I'm like personally on the hunt for now, and like really really finding interesting.
Yeah, I mean, certainly. So I'm an investor actually in the company. I think it's pretty cool. And if you met Todd, he's pretty cool. At last breakpoint, I was just at like a Solana event, and Todd had this backpack, and in his backpack there was like a bunch of whiskey samplers and stuff. So like he like really, and like he'll like do like a tasting with you, and like gives you like these tips and tricks on how to enjoy it and stuff. And so like the concept of you having maybe this idea that you're really into in this business, and then using the chain, using the properties of the chain to help improve that business is ultimately what it's kind of all about, right? It's the same idea with Hive Mapper, right? The decentralized mapping network. They tried to do their business without crypto at first, and they ran into a few issues, which blockchains really helped them with, and it helped their business. And I actually believe that the Baxis, the whiskey thing, actually also uses, or at least will use helium as well for
Yeah, it
certain
does.
aspects of it.
Exactly. They use it to operate like a lot of their sensors. So they'll run the hotspots and then plug in their like humidity sensors or temperature sensors, and they can like give live updates on the status of the vaults where the bottles are stored. And so like I don't know how they're like specifically passing that metadata back into the NFTs. I don't know if they're going to create their own standard, or I think they're using Metaplex. I don't know. I need to dive into more of the technical details, but I'm like, it's all on chain, which is the beauty, and like it's there waiting to be accessed and analyzed.
Yeah. And so like, that kind of maybe speaks to the composability aspect a little bit as well. So, and, that's, people who've been listening to this, or at least been following me, are probably well aware at this point, but kind of my entire gripe with the industry has always been like, work backwards from some problem that you have, or some market gap that exists, and then build something and see if crypto helps. Farcast is also super good at this. Like they didn't even use the chain for a lot of aspects, and it's sometimes you just kind of forgot you're even on a blockchain, but you still get inherit certain properties of a blockchain. And so yeah, it's I'm quite bullish on things like, because entrepreneurs like that inspire other entrepreneurs, right? And then you kind of have this network effect of, oh, they did this, maybe I can tweak it a little bit and build something else. And then you kind of start getting this effect where more legit businesses are being built. And yeah, like that's super excited to see that. And props to that team. And also there's also I've seen some sort of with regulatory clearance coming a little bit, right? In more, let's say, people showing like politicians showing support for some of these real world assets and crypto, and how crypto rails can improve things. For example, like how PayPal now extended to Solana as well. You kind of, the dominoes start falling, and then all of a sudden, hopefully next year, by the time we do this podcast, we even recognize the industry.
All right, let's take a quick break to talk about Helium Mobile. Every month, I'm reminded of the pain of a phone bill for someone who is terminally online. Those data charges are no joke. Well, Helium Mobile is bringing a crypto-native solution to this. It's powered by a combination of a decentralized wireless network and the nation's largest 5G network to bring reliable coverage to its users. The coolest part for me are definitely the mobile token rewards. They're earned by sharing your location, which allows more people to build coverage where it's needed most. So effectively, the token rewards end up bringing a better product to the customer. But even cooler, you can take these rewards and pay for your phone bill directly within the app. This is a beautiful showcase of arguably crypto's two strongest use cases: incentivized user action and crypto payment rails. The phone plan is unlimited talk, text, and data, plus it's affordable at just $20 a month. If this sounds interesting to you, go to hellohelium.com to get 3 free months of service with the code LIGHTSPEEDMOBILE. Again, that's LIGHTSPEEDMOBILE, all caps, no spaces. Be sure to check out the link in the show notes for easy access. All right, guys, let's get back to the show. For sure. And there was 2 other like major themes over the last 2 weeks. I feel like One I personally find far more exciting than the other, but PayPal is launching PYUSD on Solana and specifically using token extensions. They really wanted some of the customization features that token extensions offer, which is super, super cool. And the other one is celebrity coins. They're coming in hot, left and right, some better than others. And so I think those are two interesting to talk about. But on the PayPal side first, this is the one I personally find more interesting. They really leaned into the fact that you can do confidential transfers and not reveal the amount of tokens being transferred from point A to point B and from user A to user B, which is super interesting. From a transparency standpoint, that's something that often gets talked about blockchains. Hey, you can see everything. You can assess the financial health of an industry or a protocol or a risk engine. But the other side of that is you need some form of privacy. And so I haven't really peeled back the layers on token extensions yet. Something I'm in the process of doing now as I'm going through and trying to track some of the PYUSD data. But it is really, really cool to have some more functionality. And I thought it was very interesting that the PayPal team specifically cited this as a reason why they wanted to launch on Solana. So these people are now sophisticated payments companies are being very intentional about what they're doing and have a much deeper understanding than I think has really ever existed before. So I don't know. I was blown away by the news. I don't know if you watched the presser at all, but I was impressed by the team and the way that they talked about the depth of knowledge around Solana as well.
Yeah. And it kind of shows you a trend that I tweet about this, which is that maybe going back slightly over a year, people kind of thought, Solana is gone. It's in next EOS. And since then, basically, we've had some sequence of events in the form of Visa showing interest in Solana, right? Then WooCommerce, WorldPay, Shopify Pay, and then Discord. And then MasterCard actually is doing a pilot. Stripe most recently, and then now PayPal. And so you're kind of starting to see a lot of these serious institutions are looking at two main chains, really, which is Ethereum, and rightfully so. There's a lot of economic security and kind of network effects there. But then also Solana, which has shown that it can handle production loads at scale while being decentralized. And so the interesting part of that, of course, is that they didn't expand just for the speed aspects of Solana, but also because of the native programmability of how the token extensions work on Solana. And so the one you're highlighting there is the confidential transfers feature, which basically encrypts the amounts being transferred, right? Because you don't want everybody to see, how much you pay for what, et cetera, right? And so it's pretty interesting to see that. And I say this I've said this very frequently, but I really do think that the payments talent on Solana is pretty crazy. There's so many X Stripe, Venmo, and Shopify Pay, etc. kind of talent on the chain. There's Sphere on ramps, off ramps, and then Code is doing things like microtransactions, right? Micropayments. In fact, actually, they had I forgot to mention this, but at Austin, they had these little things where it was tip cards, where you can just kind of it's like a physical tip card, you can leave it somewhere, and then if you just scan it, you can send them any kind of small amount of tip in 400 milliseconds or less, because they use a soft sequencer instead of waiting for the L1. So I really and then there was actually at the Solana house, you could pay for coffee using USDC and stuff, and there was even a rave that I went to, and they asked for Phantom, and you would pay with it using that, and so it's just such a it feels like such a modern experience, and so I'm super glad to see payments taking off more. And I think the fact that enterprises and institutions are waking up to hey, wait a minute, we don't have to set up our entire own infrastructure and run it and do all these setups and integrations, but we can actually just plug into this globally atomic state machine that everybody else is already using and has done the hard work of maintaining, securing, building integrations on top of. If you can kind of hook into that and then use our distribution and let's say business prowess and start to contribute, then you start getting this maybe you start getting somewhat closer to crypto's vision of, P2P payments, and much better global commerce, much more efficient, rather than these weirdly old and antiquated like COBOL mainframes that do batch processing every 2 days in the basements of New York banks. So hopefully we see more of that going forward.
Yeah, I'm with you. The payments narrative is important, I think, and we're going to see it grow. And I think like the so what for users is just like at the end of the day, if this there, we're seeing experimentation. We know that's happening, and if it leads to a better user experience for you, like you win, and you probably don't even end up knowing what the back end is, and like that's okay. So for the user, you probably just get a better UX, and for like if you're just Solana passionate, what that means is an influx of transaction demand, and I think that's definitely something that most people are looking for as well. If again coming from that like crypto native lens.
Yeah, and there's like two sides to this where like Multicoin actually had a good piece on this. But like when you think of payments, there's kind of actually two aspects, right? There's kind of the rails themselves, like the technology that you use to move the money around. But I think, and then there's, for that to work, you need on ramps and off ramps, and those to be pretty solid and frictionless and great UX. The other part of this, though, is if you're a chain that is home to DePIN in RWAs and stuff like that, you start to earn money directly on chain, and that completely eliminates even the need for on ramps and off ramps, right? If you're like let's say you do bounties or write code, or maybe you're in a hotspot, or maybe you're mapping, or maybe you rent out your GPU capacity or something, you're earning these things directly on chain. And as more and more people do that, I don't know what that time frame looks like, maybe 5 years or something. But as more and more people do that, then the need for just being able to pay without worrying about the on ramps and off ramps goes up. And I think that's pretty interesting, especially in developing places where the on ramp off ramp situation is like bordering robbery. I want to say, right? Like it gets pretty bad. And so I think if there are some small pockets in the world of small markets like Latams of the world, maybe some parts of Africa, Southeast Asia, et cetera, where you don't even have to worry about on ramps, off ramps. You just get paid on chain, but then use the existing payment rails on chain to conduct finance or commerce. That starts looking super interesting.
Yeah, that's actually a great angle. I've never even considered it from that lens. Maybe I'll try to find that multi-coin piece and put the link in the show notes as well, because that's a good one. I guess the other side of this was the celeb coins. I'll try to do a recap of an attempt at what happened over the past couple of days. So I think it really kicked off with Caitlyn Jenner launching a token around. It seems to be this like ominous character named Sahil that is what appears to be, and again, I'm sure there's a couple degens out there that are about to call me an idiot for getting the sequence of events here wrong, but this is from my point of view. Seems to be this Sahil character kind of behind the scenes, reaching out to the managers of these famous people and saying, hey, like I'll launch this token, you'll make a bunch of money. Probably leaves out the fact that he will too. And he's like running the contract deployment and like the Twitter the social media presence for these campaigns. Seemed like Caitlyn Jenner had hers first, and then kind of was like this weird sequence of like Floyd Mayweather was on there. Rich the Kid was back in the conversation about having this as well. DeVito was another one, and then Iggy as well. Iggy Azalea, I think like realized that what was happening here from like this is mostly a scam point of view, and so decided to like independently launch her own token. And this one, she hosted a Twitter space, which I listened to. So crypto Twitter was like in love with the Twitter space. I don't know. To me, it just sounded like she was bored and wanted to have some fun. And like, I'm not saying there's anything wrong with that, but like, I don't think she's like coming at the space to like make it better or anything like that. I think she was just like, yeah, like this looks cool. Like, let me try to do it. Like, why not? I don't think there's anything wrong with that, but there is this weird push and pull of like these social tokens. If you like rewind to the NFT craze of last cycle, social tokens really were like something often discussed. You saw a lot of celebrities like launch these NFT projects that were supposed to have utility. Most of them don't because they've been abandoned. And it's like, it's really hard to kind of figure out like what is the proper purpose of a social token, right? You don't get a portion of their career earnings, or most like a lot of these recent launches, you don't get any utility at all. A lot of them will like advertise that you don't get any utility at all. It's like just like a fun thing, right? But like, why does the marginal buyer exist? It's because they think that the token price will go up. So I don't know. What are your thoughts on the ideas of like these celebrities launching social tokens? It's this very strange time we're in. I genuinely do not know how to think about this.
Yeah, it seems to be quite a controversial topic, especially when the price goes up. Things that seem a bit questionable seem to be controversial because people's, let's say, financial motives get in the way a little bit. So, yeah, there are a few things about this. So, I mean, I don't think the inherent idea of celebrities launching a coin can be good or bad. It kind of just is. My problem, so several problems with this, but one of my problems is that people try to intellectualize this into be like, oh, well, this is the next future of finance. There's this economy, and then you use tokens to capture this part of this economy, and it grows and it's stuff. And it's like, no, the reason you're saying that is because the price is actually going up right now. But the price is not going to keep going up forever because it's not backed by anything. And then people will say something like, well, money is a meme. Okay. And I'm like, okay, go to the United States. Let me know what you think is the meme there, because that is an entire nation backing that thing. Okay. So it's like Kyle says a lot, which is reasoning by analogy often leads to the wrong conclusion. It's absolutely true here. I think there's a few things here, but basically, as long as you're like super upfront about the information asymmetry present in these things, right? So, for example, a celebrity will have like maybe some wallets that are anonymous holding X% of the token, and you just like can't know that. The tooling for it doesn't really exist. And basically, what we do is rely on Zach XBT to call them out at some point. And if he does that, then we won't buy it. If he doesn't, then who knows? And so I think it's actually quite good to practice high degrees of skepticism here, because historically, like the success rate of these things is basically zero, right? And so I think if you just label it as something like, okay, we're having fun, it's a casino, we're speculating on all this stuff, it's like, fine. I think that's okay. I think if you're like super upfront about that, that's cool. As long as there's no like information asymmetry that you're hiding from the buyers, right? Because my thing is, as long as the buyers and sellers have the same information, right, and the buyer or the sellers aren't like hiding certain things like unlocks and like the uh, eventual rug of the project or something, that's fine. Um, and so, but I think using that to say like we're getting like real adoption or something is kind of missing the point. And I tweeted about this yesterday, which is that like one of the silliest ideas is kind of looking for adoption for the sake of adoption without it actually solving any problems, right? Like it's kind of like looking for a girlfriend just for the sake of getting a girlfriend without actually liking the person you're with or something. It's like, sure, you got the adoption, but it's like, why? Just so you can say you did it? Like it's not. And so I think, and this goes actually back to what we were talking about with Baxis and maybe HighMapper, which is that adoption is something that emerges from there's being a problem, and then you putting out a solution, and then people adopting that solution to solve their problems. Okay, so in this case, the problem is maybe people are bored and maybe they want ways to make money and speculate. And then, so is this adoption for that? Sure, absolutely. I mean, clearly, meme coins have adoption in the case of making money, having fun, speculating. Now, obviously, there's also when you combine that with information asymmetry, that also leads to a lot of scams. And I think it's wrong to say that it's all scams, but I think it's also wrong to say that this is like adoption and like we're bringing things on chain because that's what crypto is all about. The truth is often much more nuanced than that. And one of the things I wasn't liking on CT was when people try to, like, they completely lose the plot and they're like, well, how is this different than, like a Peloton stock going down or like a Uniswap token price going down? And it's like, okay, now you're on very dangerous territory, because now you're basically trying to make it seem like everything on earth is a meme and that nothing matters and that nothing should be tied to reality. Okay. That's cope. Okay. You are coping with the fact that there is no real value being created anywhere. Right. Speculate all you want. That's fine. But do not detract from the work that people are actually doing. Like Peloton fundamentally, at least, produces things that they think will help people in that market, which is, people trying to get fit and maybe work out at home or whatever, or maybe join a community, stuff like that. And so they produce some sort of goods and services and they get value for it. And then the market values it however. But there's still some aspect of reality there. And so if you are now in this going with this narrative that everything is a meme, it's super dangerous, because now you're maybe inspiring other people to think that way. And so now in a space that already doesn't have too much substance to begin with, I mean, there's some substance, but maybe it's a little lacking. If you're now saying, actually, nothing is real, everything is a meme, therefore just focus on memes, that starts to look pretty stupid and false. Like, it's just not how it works. And if you do that, I don't think you ever get true adoption. So that's my gripe with it. Again, speculate all you want, whatever. That's okay. I do not care about this. But do not try to like over intellectualize it to like, this is actually really good because of X and nothing is real anyways. Okay. That's kind of my point on it. And so, you kind of have to hold these two things in your mind without going too far into one camp, in my view.
Well said. Well said. But the role of a VC is to over intellectualize, Mert. No, I'm kidding. No, I mean, I agree. I liked what you said at the very beginning there, which was, it just is like, this will just exist. I would prefer people to not blatantly scam people. But if you're going to just like launch a token and like not rug it, like, okay, I don't know if there's any legal consequences there. Like, I don't think anybody knows. But it seems like something that's going to happen, and you're going to get these things called social tokens, and they're probably going to end in tears. So tread carefully, but speculate freely. I mean, that's kind of the TLDR, in my opinion, in there as well.
Yeah. Also, the one thing that I that I'd like to say is, like, people were like, so Iggy's coin, I think Mother or something, like went down and then it went up, and people were like, oh, look, it didn't rug. And that was their standard, right? It had been maybe 4 days, I believe. And they were like, oh, like, she's super into crypto. She has been talking about it for 4 days and didn't rug. And it's like, what I would say to that is, please have some higher standards.
Yeah, good God.
Right? Like, I mean, look, if I have 7.6 million followers or whatever, and I launch a token, no real rational person would rug that unless they just totally don't care. And so the fact that it wasn't rugged and that she asked questions like, how does this work? It's like, okay, cool. But maybe we're being blinded a little bit by the price going up and starting to just the number one thing is think for yourself and don't let markets kind of think for you. Because if you do that, you're not going to like it when the market goes down, right? I think Jeff Bezos has some sort of saying like that. Just please have some higher standards than like, oh, this is successful because it didn't rug right away.
That's what I was saying about the Twitter space. Like, everybody was like, oh my God, she is incredible. Like, this is awesome. I'm like, she like just is curious. That was my takeaway. She was like, oh yeah, this is like cool. Like, let me play around with it. Like, I'm interested. that was the standards. I totally agree. I'm like, good Lord, like, you got to pick it up a little bit, people. But I don't know. Maybe that was an interesting take as well. And Ryan Connor from the Blockworks research team had a really interesting viewpoint on this. He was like, this feels pretty normal to me. I don't know. Like, me and my buddies will throw $100 on whatever random sports, if it's like, it's an NBA final. So like, we're betting on that. We're going to watch it. It's not about winning. It's about like enjoying the moment with your friends and like making fun of the guy who made the shitty bet. Like, that's what it is. It's like, this just feels like the same thing, but with a different sport, and it's meme coins. So that one hit home for me, because I was like, yeah, no, me and my friends do the same shit. So it's just this weird speculative gambling in like a different internet context. Feels kind of dystopian when you frame it like that, but like, the sport is watching green and red bars on the screen. Like that's literally what it is.
Yeah, and like that's fine. Okay, that's fine. If you want to do that, go ahead. The problem starts to arise when you then extrapolate to say this is the only thing this industry is about and everything is a meme. Okay, I disagree with that strongly, and I think many other people
For
trying to
sure.
build real things would as well. And so, you know, just I do not want people to look at crypto and be like, this is it, that's it, nothing else, right? And because that's not going to work in your favor against regulators either. It's like, hey, Senator, what is crypto good for? It's like, oh well, Iggy Azalea launched a coin and didn't rug in 4 days, so it's like let's do maybe some higher standards.
My friends, big news. Blockworks is hosting Permissionless 3 in Salt Lake City this year, so we're heading west for 3 days starting October 9th. Permissionless is our industry's premier DeFi event that brings together crypto natives from all over the globe. I've personally been the last 2 years and can honestly say that the attendees are incredible. It's people who actually care about crypto. We'll also have more than 200 industry titans speaking at the event, and this includes builders like Lucas Bruder from Jito Labs and Brian Pellegrino from Layer Zero, or investors like Kyle Samani and Joe McCann, and even elected officials like Representative Tom Emmer, who is fighting the good fight in Washington. And it's narrative season, so we're going to be covering the 7 hottest themes in crypto. This includes things like modularity and restaking, or Bitcoin and L2s, and even AI and crypto. The goal is to keep you up to speed on major developments in the industry. Ticket prices will be structurally increasing over time, so get your ticket today. For my Lightspeed family, I got you. We're going to use code LIGHTSPEED10 in all caps, no space, for 10% off your ticket. All right, everyone. I look forward to seeing you at Permissionless 3, and let's get back to the show. Yeah. Another thing I want to talk about, I guess, is more ending on a technical note, but failed transactions just keep coming up. Which I get it. It's like an easy chart that gets circulated around, and like even we do this. Like green is failed, green is successful, red is failed, and so when you filter out the green one, you just see these red bars that said failed, and people are like, well, oh, this is a shitty UX. And so I've had it. I've had it with this narrative because it's just not true, and I don't like I'm not upset with anyone. It is a hard concept to understand, and I put out a thread that was like a 4-part series on this concept, which was literally 4 Lightspeed episodes, ending with the Tully and Lucas episode. And so I want to take a look at some of this data. So let's start from the top again. Here's the failed transaction count, total transaction count. We'll filter out the votes. So we're just looking at non-votes here in the top left. We saw a material decrease starting around the beginning of June, which we'll jump into in a second. But I just want to take a look here, because one thing that I found super interesting was I've broken out the transactions based on the number, like basically created user segments based around the number of transactions you send per day. So I broke that up between like 1 to 5 transactions being like this very simple user, 6 to 50 being more of like a power trader, right? If you run like 15 transactions in a day, like you're someone trading celebrity coins all day, and that's okay, but look, you're a different user group. And they've kind of scaled that up to basically bots that are, if you send over 5,000 transactions in a day, like you are not a human. I physically don't think you could you could click that many times in a day. And so I've kind of segmented these to like really draw out real users from like very clear bots that are spamming the network. Couple things to take away. The 1 to 5 transactions per day group accounts for 1.6% of the total transactions sent per day and 76% of the total active addresses in a day. So we have this huge address pool that only generates 1.6% of transactions. And on the flip side of that, we see the bots group, or that over 5,000 transactions per day. They're 86% of the total transactions and only 0.1% of the total addresses. So we have about 3,000 addresses that account for 86% of the transactions in a day. I think that's going to be a trend you see going forward on every major chain that's cheap. If you have cheap transactions, you have the ability to run interesting scripts. And a lot of this is related to arbitrage. I don't think that's a good or bad thing. That's another one of those things that like just is. Now, when we see this chart in the top right here, which is the non-vote transaction breakdown between failed and successful transactions, everybody gets all alarmed here because like, oh my God, over half the transactions on Solana fail, meaning I have to send 2 transactions to get what my intent through the system, which is not the case. And so when we look back at our table that kind of breaks down what these failure rates are for each of these transaction groups, we see that the bot group, again, over 5,000 transactions in a day, fails about half the time, but the normal user, that 1 to 5, fails about 9% of the time. And so when we look at that on a chart, I've put basically calling the normal users, the power users, and the bots on this chart here on the left. And you can see the discrepancy over the last month between these groups. And what this tells to me is like, hey, there are arbitrages that are profitable if you spam them over and over again. But I was talking about this on Twitter the other day, and somebody had a very good point. They're like, hey, well, a 9% failure rate is still not good. Right? Like that's 1 in every 10 transactions failing for a normal user. And I was like, okay, well, that's a good point. But the takeaway is there shouldn't be like the transaction doesn't just go through like just because. Again, these are failed transactions where your transaction made it into the block, but reverted before it could complete because there was some error. So I zoomed in on that 1 to 5 transactions per day group and said, all right, well, like what are the errors that you guys are hitting the most? And so 75% of the errors that happen for that group are slippage related errors for Jupiter and Radium based swaps. So this is like this normal user goes in and is like, hey, I want to buy this celebrity meme coin. And I'm going to put my transaction through for like $100 and 0.1% slippage. Like these meme coins are so volatile that will almost always fail. And so the point here being like this is like sort of a front end or an application issue and not a chain level problem. And so I just want to like unpack that again because I feel like the discourse is still related to this is a chain problem, but it's not. The chain problem is the networking layer. And like when I click send on Phantom and I just get a spinning wheel for about a minute to 2 minutes and then nothing happens, like that is a dropped transaction. It never made it to the leader, or if it did make it to the leader can never process it and like recognize it as being there. And that is the big problem, but is much harder to track because the leaders basically are the only people that have this data. On that last podcast I mentioned earlier with Anatoly and Lucas, Anatoly said there was about like 500,000, 500,000 transactions that are hitting the leader at times. And if we look at the blocks, there's only about 800 to 1,000 or so transactions, non-vote transactions that are making it in. And so those dropped transactions, like those are the big issue. So Mert, I don't know if there's any color you want to add there, but one more thing I found super interesting on this is looking at the median fee paid by these groups. So that bot group has a very, very low median fee, meaning that, they're figured out a way to, or when they're spamming, I haven't really unpacked this, so this is me thinking aloud, but when they're sending all of these transactions, they're like, because we're sending so many of these, like we'll probably be at the front of the block and don't really need to worry about paying a high priority fee, given that priority fee mechanism is a little bit broken today. And then on the contrary, you see that 1 to 5 and 6 to 50 groups. You see both of them being like, I want this thing through. And like when people hear priority fee, they're like, if I pay more, it'll go faster. And so you actually see a significantly higher priority fee for both of those groups relative to the bots. But even more interestingly is the 6 to 50 is consistently paying more in their median fee relative to the 1 to 5. And if you think about who the difference is between a 6 to 50 transactions per day and a 1 to 5 transactions per day, that is somebody who is like actively trading meme coins and is like willing to take on more risks or to pay higher fees because they, nobody's trading a meme coin for a 5% gain. Like they're all trading for 10x, 50x's. So yeah, it's kind of an interesting data set that I've recently been playing with.
Cool. Yeah. Thanks for that. I mean, first of all, I think I need access to this so I can look at it and create some stolen tweets. But yeah, I mean, I think that analysis makes sense. And one of the things is like what people don't seem to understand is that like fee markets exist, but they're not implemented in a bulletproof fashion. And so what you end up having, and by the way, continuous block building makes this worse as well because it's some sort of probability function to be included in the block, and it consists of fees but also spam. And so some combination of spam and paying the right fees and being from some geography, given who the leader is, et cetera, being first to the leader, you combine all these things and you get some output for probability of being included in the block. And so we're kind of in this awkward phase where you can get included in the block if you spam enough sometimes. Some validators are actually starting to block that because it's super low quality traffic and they obviously have an incentive to maximize their block rewards. But then some, searchers or arbitrators are exploiting the system as well, which is, well, we actually, if we spam enough, we might still be more profitable than just paying the fees to get in. And so there's some shortcomings with the system, but we are aware of pretty much all these issues. There's a lot of work behind the scenes by a lot of teams, right? Like Jito, Firedancer, Anza, Margin, Helios, Overclock, and we're making a lot of good progress here. And this is actually my favorite part of shitcoins, which is that we've built a system as engineers, and shitcoining leads to such an environment where people are always trying to exploit certain parts of the system, right? Trying to extract value on both kind of the supply side and the demand side. And you play these out in production with adversarial environments and different motives, and you start to see how the system behaves. And then that's like, that data is gold. Once you have that data, you're like, okay, here's what I need to fix. Here's what I will fix. Once I fix this, and then when the next, whatever activity happens or cycle happens, we're much better off for that. And the system scales much better, right? That's kind of the superpower of being an engineering-driven culture on Solana, which is you ship things, you see how they work, and then you fix the things. And if your time horizon is long, right, it's not 2 years, right? Let's assume Solana goes down in like the next 5 months, and your time horizon is 1 year. That's bad. But if your time horizon is 100 years, and that learning actually improved Solana and made it much more anti-fragile for the next X amount of years, that's what you want. Obviously, you don't want a liveness failure on purpose, but you do want the learnings. And sometimes the only way to get those learnings is to kind of ship things in prod and serve users and see what happens. And so that's very solid analysis. Thanks for doing the work there.
Yeah, you've called out the engineering focused culture. Sometimes I'm like, think like an economist for just 2 seconds here, and then let's go back to the engineering side. But because sometimes I'm like, I think we need to think about the economic side of this. But I think you can see Ethereum has shifted probably too heavily in the economist camp rather than the engineering camp in some regard. And so, yeah, I think there is a balance there, I will say. But in the beginning half of the life cycle, I do very much think it needs to be like, you got to be maxing out for the engineering side of things because of what you just mentioned. Like, you're going to end up optimizing for a situation that is not going to be your normal state. And what I mean by that is, like, even talking to Tolly and Lucas on that episode again, he was like, there should be like an order of operations where we shouldn't make an economic decision based on the current state of the chain because we know there are bugs in the implementation of our networking layer. And so if we did them in the reverse order, then we'd end up having to change it twice. And so I'm like, okay, like that's a very practical way to approach the problem. And one thing I think about that really gets like lost in the sauce of the comparisons between Ethereum and Solana is people are comparing the 9-year-old Ethereum to the 4-year-old Solana in their current states. But I'm like, if you shift the timelines back and compare 4-year-old Ethereum to 4-year-old Solana, that's where you get a much different world, right? People point to the inflation of like 5.5% on Solana and say, oh my God, like this is crazy. Ethereum's like raw issuance is like less than 1%. Like, yeah, it's a 9-year-old chain. It's already like gone through its economic cycle. And that has not happened on Solana. We still have a fee mechanism that nobody really likes, but is functional. So we keep it, right? Like, I don't know. I'm really kind of thinking about comparing these things on a more life cycle timeline than rather than like the point A and point B of today. I think that like adds an extra layer of complexity there and gives you a little bit deeper of an analysis. That's something I'm building. Maybe I'll have it ready for next week. But nonetheless, always a pleasure chatting, Mert. Really enjoyed this week's roundup. And to the listeners, we will see you next week.